going great. Yesterday was really slow, but
yeah, we were chanting for a good
right. Yeah, I know. We had a nice talk, didn't we?
Yeah, nice.
We ironed out that whole Israeli-Palestinian thing, and but it's been steady today.
Did some portraits or sketches.
Yeah, my hand is throbbing right now because I was actually kind of glad that I got called to do this.
We're gonna get like a bunch of like laughing comments, hand throbbing YouTube.
Yeah. Well, YouTube with its tradition of high IQ commenting is always lots of fun. LOL first or something.
Yeah. that just reminds me of that channel, Your Grammar Sucks, where they show all these bad comments with horrible grammar, missing letters.
Sorry,
and stuff like
all
that.
I ever watch is Maggie Bone and that Vietnamese girl putting on her makeup. She's really. I love her voice.
Yeah.
That chick has a great voice.
Yeah.
I could just listen to her. And then you put on the eyeshadow like this. I'm like, boy, I really wish I was a girl so I could put on some eyeshadow. She makes it sound so great. Yeah, I can't pull that look off at my age.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like Ringo, didn't Ringo start turning like
70 something.
70.
You know what's funny? We were just talking about Ringo yesterday, me and someone else, about how out of all the Beatles, he was the most ordinary and least rock star, and yet he had the greatest life of any of them. He's still married to the same really hot-looking chick.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of #1 hits as an independent, artist.
I think last year he came up with an album as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's still working, and he still looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And all he ever wanted to do was make enough to own his own hairdressing shop, because that's what he was a hairdresser.
Oh.
And Paul has had his share of tragedies. Of course, John and George are dead. So
yeah,
it's good to be Ringo Starr, I think.
Yeah, I guess it's a good time to be Ringo Starr right now. Yeah. So, Bruce, were you always sure that you wanted to be part of this pop culture in the animated industry?
Well, to be honest, no. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a little boy, but I'm terrible at math and my eyesight's no good, so that wasn't going to happen. I grew up in East Dallas, and my aunt is Japanese, and so I used to spend a great deal of time at their house as a kid because her 3 sons are my cousins, obviously. Mm-hmm. And she would go to Japan every year and bring back just tons of loot. And this was back in the 70s, the golden age of anime and manga. So
yes.
Just huge stacks of great old manga. Shotaro Ishinomori and Go Nagai and Leiji Matsumoto and all the biggies. And she'd bring back toys, candy, magazines, everything. And so I just grew up around it, and that's kind of how I got hooked on it.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So, for some of our aspiring fans, anyone who wants to be part of this industry, do you have any real tips for them?
It depends on what part of the industry they want to be in.
Because I know you've done multiple things. I mean, you write books, you've done voice work, and you obviously, when you're in the dealer room, if you go to the dealer room, you do chibi, non-chibi, and sketches.
Right.
I guess we can just start with one of the more popular. I would say probably voice work. Maybe let's try that.
Voice acting is a tough gig. It's as hard to get into as radio is, but it doesn't pay as well. So I mean, it's like all the heartbreak of radio without the big paycheck, and radio's paychecks are not really all that big anyway. So for someone who wants to be a voice actor, really, I guess my advice would be to not concentrate so much on being an anime voice actor, but to look at vocal work in general as a career. Because here in Dallas especially, there's a huge amount of work for VO people, they call them, voice-over artists. One of the big vocal talent agencies is here in town, and they cast people for commercial work all the time. Most of the commercials you see on TV, the VO work is produced here in town, because Dallas being where it is, we don't have an accent. You just have like the standard white guy accent, which is what they want on TV and on radio ads, because it doesn't, if someone says, buy our computers, somebody from Maine might think, I don't want that computer. But if it was like, oh, I think you should buy a motor oil because it's very nice. Some guy from Alabama was like, I don't want that Yankee motor oil, I want some good Southern motor oil. So here in Dallas, people tend to have a very neutral Midwestern, not a Midwestern like Chicago accent, but just a general American accent. And so most big VO work is done here.
It works.
Like most of the station IDs for radio are done here, even if it's for Canada. There's like CTFG or whatever it is. That's all here. And so if you approach if you approach it from the standpoint of, well, I want to work as a vocal talent, rather than I want to be an anime voice actor, then
Yeah.
I think you're less likely to be disappointed and more likely to be able to earn a living because you're not limiting yourself. It's as if you wanted to be a regular actor, said, I only want to be in cop shows. Here comes Mr. Broadway, I want you to be on my play, and you're like, nope, sorry, cop shows only for me. That's no way to approach it.
Yeah. So, I gotta ask you, what was like your most memorable experience throughout your career in the field?
You mean in just voice acting or in everything?
In anything. So, like, what was something you would just the most memorable?
Wow, it's been a long time. I'm old, but I guess back in the '90s, I worked in the comic book business back in those days, and when I was a kid, I was a big fan of this show called Star Blazers, which you've probably heard of. In Japan, it's called Space Battleship Yamato, but here in America, it was called Star Blazers, and we used to watch it on TV when I was a kid. And it's always been my favorite anime. It always will be. And then in the '90s, we had our own publishing company, me and two other guys who were in business together out in LA, and we got the contract to produce the Star Blazers comic books.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, basically getting paid to write fan fiction for your favorite show, that's not a bad gig. But the real thrill of it was, all the characters in the American version, the Japanese characters were given American names for the US version, but they were only given one name, a first name basically. And none of them had family names except for one or two. And so as part of working on the comic book, I got to devise all the family names for all the full names of every character on the show, even the aliens and the minor characters. And today they still use all those names that I came up with. So, that's my little mark on the Star Blazers Yamato world. I got to do something that's, going to stick with it, even all those years later.
Yeah.
So that's thrilling to me because, it's fun to. It's like the first time I got to go on the set of Star Trek. When I was a kid, I was like a big Star Trek fan. I still like Star Trek. And when I was out in LA, work took me to the Paramount lot, just by chance, and I got to go on the set of Deep Space Nine and meet all the people and everything. And come on, for a Star Trek fan, that's pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome.
And that's about as cool as it gets. And it was like that, when I got to come up with the names for all the characters. It was like being a part of it. My little 5 minutes of history. That's pretty pathetic, isn't it?
No, that's great. That's great.
But that show means a lot to me still. And now of course they're remaking it, Yamato 2199, which is up to episode 3, I think now, or 4.
I think 3.
Yeah, I think they've released up to 3.
Yeah.
And that I noticed some things in the Japanese show that they have brought over from Star Blazers from our comic book.
Wow.
Just some little technical things like the wave motion gun, operations or whatever. But it's fun to be part of it, to be involved in it. And if they're watching it 50 years from now when I'm dust, my little names will still be. That's sad, isn't it?
Oh man, it's great. It's great to have. It's great for something like that. I mean, a lot of our fans, a lot of us, especially in this pop culture, the animation culture. I mean, we would just love to be doing that. Every fan's.
Well, it's thrilling. It really is.
It's fun,
especially for me, because I grew up really poor, and of course I'm still poor, but I was dirt poor back then, and to be part of this thing that was just a big part of my youth, it's been really thrilling in a lot of ways, and of course, I've managed to make a nice living over the years. Not a pile or a fortune or anything, but we eat 3 times a day, which was always a roll of the dice when I was a kid, frankly. So it's nice, and I feel very lucky that I got to do this for a living rather than something I would have hated, like being a fighter pilot. I probably would have hated that. When I was in the Navy, I was gone all the time, and it's hard for a family person to be gone all the time. So I probably wouldn't have liked being a fighter pilot anyway. I guess God knew what He was doing. Gave me bad eyes.
There's a reason for everything.
Well, I think that. So.
Yeah. So, just out of curiosity, are you currently working on any new projects or anything that for our fans to get excited about?
Well, yes, our family car moving business is really my wife and I have a family business. We move cars around. It's that's just what we do. But Robert DeJesus and I, who a lot of the people who watch your show are probably real familiar with him. He's a really fantastic artist and storyteller. We're going to be, if all goes well, working on a kids book together. I'm putting the MS together right now, back at home, and it's going to be called Family to the Moon, and it's about, as you might guess from the title, a family that goes to the moon. But it's set in the future, about 20, 30 years from now, where I'm grandpa and my wife is grandma, and Hans is a grown-up with kids of his own. And I've changed all the names, but
Yeah.
it's based on our real family, and we decided to go on vacation to the moon, which is there's people living on the moon by this time, in my imagination. So
Yeah.
I get to show us, how we get there and the space liner and everything. And I love stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm really geared up for now. is to do
Yeah.
this. I've never done a children's book before, so.
It's always something interesting. Well, now that we're mentioning your projects, what were some of your influences when you were working in the industry for a while?
You mean as an artist or as a voice actor?
As an artist, let's go with the artist. I kind of like to touch all the bases here.
Well, back in the 80s, there was a lot of comics and character design were done by this guy named Haruhiko Mikimoto, who I'm sure most of your fans are familiar with him because he's very famous. He was the guy that designed Lin Min Mei, for example, from Across. And I always used to think, God, if I could only draw like that guy. And I tried, but one of the lessons I had to learn the hard way in this business was that it's pointless to try to draw like somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You have to draw like yourself. And if you try to draw someone else, you may be able to fake it, but it's always going to look stiff and forced.
Yeah.
And that was, even though he influenced me a great deal in how I design characters, I had to eventually realize that that's his way, not my way. And I think once I made that jump, I was able to do better work. Because I look back at some of my older books now and I think, ugh, I can't believe they paid me for this. It's terrible. I can't stand to read my old comics. They're awful. But, I was learning too. And I'm glad I got paid to do it, but, he and Leiji Matsumoto, I think, were the big influences on me artistically. Also Tintin, Hergé's Tintin. No one could tell a story visually like that guy. I'll never even come close to his level, because he's a genius. That's why he's famous, is because he's a genius. American comics I also liked when I was growing up too. Kurt Swan was my favorite Superman artist. I don't think anyone ever drew the Man of Steel better than him, and I was a big Superman fan when I was a kid.
Are you excited for the Man of Steel?
I'm hopeful.
You're hopeful?
To me, Superman died in 1985. The Superman that I know, that I love, because the one now like cusses and has illegitimate children and stubble, and he's like the brawny paper towel guy in the cape. So, I don't consider what they have now to be Superman, because he's so different than the Truth, Justice, and American Way Superman that I really loved as a kid. But from what I hear, this new movie is going to be much more, traditional Superman, rather than the brawny paper towel Superman that we got last time.
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, Warner's they're not in the business of making movies, they're in the business of making money. And I know they'll do whatever they gotta do,
Yes, since they got big names like Nolan. And
yeah,
Snyder
exactly.
working on
But,
it.
I'm hopeful because at least it's a fresh look at it. And, if it turns out to stink, well, I just won't go see it, no big deal.
Save the $10.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't go see the last one, and I don't feel like I was cheated out of anything. I heard it wasn't very good.
Sadly, I was cheated.
Once I saw his uniform with all the tiny little Superman S's on it, I was like, no, I'm going to see that. He's too skinny now, too.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, Superman should be more like Christopher Reeve. He's a big guy, big horse riding guy, and the guy they had last time, was a nice looking guy, obviously, and very well built, but he's too thin. Superman needs to be more husky, more like a big Midwestern wheat farmer type guy, not some guy that works for the New Yorker magazine, does restaurant reviews or something.
Clark Kent did live with his.
He was a well-known reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper, but of course we don't have any great metropolitan newspapers anymore. Wonder what Clark Kent would do now. He'd probably work for Breitbart or Huffington Post or something, some online thing.
Yeah.
Drudge.
He blogs.
Clark Kent's blog.
The Kryptonian Chronicle.
He would have stayed in Smallville, though. He'd be living in Mom and Pa Kent's basement. He never would have met Lois or any of the cool people.
Oh man.
Jimmy would be the most famous person in the world, today's world.
Yeah. Well, it's been good talking to you, Bruce.
Thanks. It was a real pleasure talking to you, too.
I'll see you at the rest of the
All
game.
right, I'll be here. Thanks.
All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you later.